Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
When my brother popped the champagne cork and everyone cheered, I was holding the biggest secret of my life, but apparently, that wasn't important enough for my own family to care. The applause rang out across the backyard, glasses clinked, and someone even started a half-hearted chant of Jason and Emily, but it all sounded distant to me, like I was underwater, struggling to breathe through a heavy fog of disappointment. I stood there, smiling until my cheeks ached, one hand pressed lightly against my stomach, feeling the tiny, invisible flutter of the life growing inside me, and the other holding a glass of ginger ale that everyone assumed was white wine. The thing is, I hadn't planned to steal the spotlight. Honestly, it had never even crossed my mind until my mother's voice sliced through the happy chaos, low and urgent, like a wasp buzzing too close to your ear. "Hannah, come here a minute," she said, tugging at my arm with a grip just a little too firm to be casual. I followed her a few steps away from the crowd, past the fairy lights strung in lazy zigzags across the fence, until we stood by the old oak tree where Jason and I used to climb when we were kids, before everything got so damn complicated. She leaned in so close I could smell the stale coffee on her breath, and then she hissed it out like a snake. "Don't ruin his big day by bringing up your news." She didn't even say it like a suggestion, more like a goddamn threat. I blinked at her, confused for a moment, because somehow, somewhere deep down, some pathetic part of me had actually expected her to be happy for me. I opened my mouth to protest, to say something about how this was family, about how I thought maybe we could share joy together like normal people, but one look at her face told me everything I needed to know. There was no room for me at this table, not tonight. Maybe not ever. Jason was the golden child, the one who had never once fallen short, no matter what he did. Flunked out of college once? Oh, it was just finding himself. Got arrested for a bar fight? Boys will be boys. Meanwhile, I had been the cautionary tale, the screw-up, the warning whispered at church luncheons. And now, even standing there, carrying the literal next generation of this family in my body, I was still somehow the embarrassment that needed to be managed. I swallowed the bitter lump rising in my throat and nodded once, curt and mechanical, the way you do when you know fighting will only make it worse. My mother gave me a tight, approving smile and patted my shoulder like I was a disobedient dog who had finally sat down. I turned back to the party, the smile plastered back onto my face like a goddamn mask, and slid into my chair at the long table under the white tent, pretending that I hadn't just been shoved aside like furniture no one wanted, but was too polite to throw away. As the evening dragged on, I kept waiting for the right moment to sneak away, to vanish into the night before my heart gave out from holding it all in. Jason gave a speech that sounded like he had copied it straight off Pinterest, full of sappy lines about new beginnings and building a life together, and I caught myself counting the lies hidden in every sentence. Emily sat beside him, nodding along, her fingers knotted tightly in her lap. She looked beautiful, sure, but there was something brittle about her, like if you touched her too hard, she might just shatter into 1,000 tiny pieces. I sipped my ginger ale, my stomach twisting with nausea that had nothing to do with the pregnancy and everything to do with the sick, heavy feeling of betrayal. From across the table, Emily kept glancing at me, quick little looks that she tried to hide but didn't quite manage. It wasn't the kind of look you give someone when you're excited or even nervous in a good way. No, it was the kind of look you give when you're carrying a grenade in your pocket and you're not sure how long you can hold onto it before it blows your whole arm off. Jason didn't seem to notice. He was too busy basking in the attention, laughing too loudly at jokes that weren't funny, soaking up compliments like a sunbather chasing the last rays of the day. It was a dance I had seen 100 times before, Jason shining bright, the rest of us orbiting around him like disposable satellites, expected to reflect his light but never cast our own. I tried to tune it all out, focusing instead on the quiet little heartbeat inside me that nobody else seemed to care about. It was strange, in a way, how something so small could feel so powerful, how it could anchor you even as everything else around you spun off its axis. Dinner was served, some overpriced catered meal that Jason insisted on because, God forbid, the engagement dinner wasn't Instagram-worthy. I picked at my plate, pretending to be interested in the overcooked chicken breast swimming in a sea of gray gravy, while the conversations around me blurred into a meaningless hum. And that was when I caught Emily staring again, longer this time, her jaw set tight like she was gearing up for something. Her hand trembled slightly as she set down her fork, and for a second, I thought she was going to be sick right there at the table. But instead, she did something even crazier. She pushed back her chair, stood up, and cleared her throat loudly enough to pull every single eye in the tent toward her. Jason looked up, confused, mid-sentence about how love is a journey or some other Hallmark bullshit, and the smile froze on his face as he registered the expression Emily wore, not nervous anymore, not fragile. No, she looked furious, like a woman who had reached the end of her rope and was about to set the whole damn thing on fire. Emily raised her glass, her hand barely steady, and said, in a voice that cut through the warm summer air like a blade, "Before we celebrate, I think you should all hear what Jason's been hiding." The laughter died instantly. You could have heard a pin drop on the goddamn lawn. Every head turned toward her, mouths slightly open, forks frozen halfway to plates. Jason's face drained of color so fast it was almost impressive, and for a split second, I thought he might actually bolt from the tent like a cartoon villain realizing the floor had just disappeared under him. And me? I sat there, heart hammering in my chest, not even breathing because I had a feeling that whatever grenade Emily was about to lob into the middle of this picture-perfect evening, it was going to leave a crater so deep none of us would ever climb out of it. The second Emily's voice cracked through the muggy summer air, the whole party seemed to freeze in place, like some twisted tableau you'd find in a museum of broken dreams. Forks hovered midair, champagne glasses paused halfway to painted lips, and even the damn cicadas outside seemed to shut the hell up for a moment, as if they knew some serious shit was about to go down. I sat there, still clutching my sweating glass of ginger ale, watching Jason's face contort through every stage of denial, rage, and barely contained panic, and for one selfish second, I almost smiled. Not because I enjoyed watching my brother squirm, even after everything, part of me still loved him, or at least the idea of him, but because it wasn't me causing the scene this time. Nope, not the family screw-up, not the drama queen, not the black sheep who somehow managed to embarrass everyone just by existing. No, tonight, the golden boy himself was about to get dragged through the mud, and I was more than happy to sit back and enjoy the goddamn show. Except, of course, life had other plans, because before Emily could get another word out, Diane sprang up from her seat like a jack-in-the-box wound a little too tight. "Maybe we should all just sit down and eat first," she said, fake laughing so hard it looked painful, her manicured hand fluttering like a dying moth in the heavy air. Jason, ever the performer, caught on quick and pasted a smile back onto his face, clinking his glass with his fork in a desperate attempt to distract everyone. "Why don't we all toast to new beginnings?" he said, voice just a shade too loud, too cheerful. And because Midwestern politeness is a disease stronger than basic human curiosity, everyone obediently raised their glasses and pretended not to see the tension, so thick you could have cut it with a butter knife. Dinner was served, some overpriced catered nonsense that Jason insisted on having, probably to impress Emily's side of the family, who had traveled all the way from somewhere fancy sounding like Cape Cod or Martha's Vineyard. I stared down at my plate, a sad little mountain of dried chicken, rubbery green beans, and something pretending to be mashed potatoes, and tried not to gag. It was ironic, really. I had spent the better part of the last 8 weeks throwing up everything I ate thanks to morning sickness, and here I was paying $30 a plate to pretend to enjoy food that was making me just as nauseous. We were all sitting at a table for 12 people, except somehow there were only 10 chairs, and still, nobody noticed. Guess math wasn't Jason's strong suit. Not that it mattered. I doubted anyone would have offered me a seat if there had been 20 chairs. I was invisible, just a bump in the road between Jason's endless parade of achievements. Diane, of course, was in her element, gushing over Jason like a pageant mom on Red Bull. Every other word out of her mouth was so proud or so lucky or so blessed, and every third word was about how Jason had overcome so much. Overcome what, exactly? Getting caught cheating in high school? Crashing Dad's car and letting me take the blame? It was like watching a bad movie on repeat, except now I didn't even have the energy to be angry. I just felt tired down to my goddamn bones. At one point, during the salad course, Diane leaned over to Emily and said loudly enough for half the table to hear, "You're marrying the best man I've ever known." I almost choked on my sparkling water, which, by the way, was the wrong brand. Jason had thrown a mini tantrum about the catering company not having his favorite brand, like the entitled little prince he had always been. Jason launched into a rambling speech next, about how life is a journey and every detour leads you exactly where you're meant to be, and I could practically feel my blood pressure rising with each canned, rehearsed line. He stood there, all fake humility and blinding white teeth, and for a moment, I was transported back to high school, watching him sweet-talk his way out of another suspension while I got dragged into the principal's office for a crime I didn't commit. Beside him, Emily shifted in her chair, her knuckles white around the stem of her glass. Her smile was brittle, cracked around the edges like a piece of old china barely holding together. Every time Jason spoke, she flinched just a little, like each word was a slap across the face she was too proud to acknowledge. Somewhere between the third and fourth course, or maybe the fifth, I lost count after the bad soup. I realized Emily wasn't just upset. She was furious. And whatever had been gnawing at her, whatever truth she was sitting on, it wasn't just a petty grievance or cold feet. No, this was the kind of fury that came from betrayal, the kind that could turn a celebration into a funeral in the blink of an eye. And the worst part? I wasn't surprised. Not even a little bit. Some part of me had known, deep down, that Jason couldn't possibly have gotten his shit together so perfectly. That there had to be skeletons rattling around somewhere behind that perfect, polished smile. And judging by the way Emily was glaring holes into the back of his skull, those skeletons were about to come tumbling out whether he liked it or not. I pushed my plate away, no longer pretending to eat, and leaned back in my chair, one hand resting lightly on my stomach. I felt oddly calm, almost serene, like the eye of a hurricane right before it swallows the world whole. If Jason thought he could talk his way out of this one, he was about to find out just how wrong he was. Across the table, Emily set down her glass with a quiet clink, wiped her mouth with a napkin so precisely it was almost chilling, and stood up again. Jason froze mid-sentence, his hand still gesturing midair as he told some bullshit story about proposing at sunset on the beach, and his eyes locked onto Emily's with a look I hadn't seen on his face since we were kids and he got caught stealing from Mom's purse. Emily's voice was steady this time, no tremble, no hesitation, just cold, sharp anger cutting through the heavy summer air. "Before we celebrate," she said, her eyes never leaving Jason's, "I think you should all hear what Jason's been hiding." The air around the table seemed to snap taut like a wire pulled too tight, and I could almost hear the collective intake of breath from everyone present. Somewhere deep inside me, something old and broken stirred to life, and for the first time all night, I smiled, not out of spite, not out of cruelty, but out of the bone-deep satisfaction of knowing that for once, the truth might finally be louder than the lies. For one breathless moment, after Emily's words knifed through the sticky summer air, nobody moved, nobody blinked, and it felt like the world itself had hit the brakes so hard the whole damn universe whiplashed. Jason stood there, frozen mid-smile like a fool who had no idea he had already been pushed off the ledge, and every eye at the table turned to him with the same quiet, ugly curiosity people get when they smell a wreck coming but can't look away. I watched Jason try to recover, saw the twitch of muscles in his jaw as he forced out a laugh that was so hollow it made my skin crawl. "Come on, babe," he said, holding out a hand toward Emily like he thought he could still spin this into a cute little lover spat, like he hadn't already lost control of the narrative. "You're blowing things way out of proportion." His voice was syrupy sweet, that careful charm he always fell back on whenever he got caught with his pants down, figuratively or literally. But Emily didn't take his hand. She didn't even flinch. She just stared at him with eyes so cold and clear it was almost beautiful, like watching the surface of a frozen lake right before it cracks wide open and swallows everything whole. "I found the texts, Jason," she said, loud enough that even the servers in the back of the tent probably heard her and maybe even the neighbors 2 houses over. "I saw the hotel receipts. I know about the weekend trips you took with her while you were supposedly working late at the office." There was a gasp from somewhere to my left, and I caught a glimpse of Aunt Carol pressing a napkin to her mouth like she might actually faint, which would have been the most exciting thing she had done in years. My own hands clenched into fists in my lap, nails biting into my palms so hard I half expected to draw blood, because I already knew deep down, some part of me had known the second Emily opened her mouth, who her was going to be. Sure enough, Emily turned her gaze toward me, and for a long, sickening second, I thought she was going to accuse me, thought maybe Jason had stooped even lower than I dared imagine. But no, it wasn't me, it was almost worse. "It was Kelsey," Emily said, voice steady, razor sharp. "Your old friend, Hannah. The one you used to call your sister." The world tilted, just a little, and I had to grip the edge of the table to keep from sliding right off my chair. Kelsey. Sweet, smiling, two-faced Kelsey, who had held my hand through breakups, who had cried drunk tears into my shoulder at bad college parties, who had once sworn up and down that she would never hurt me no matter what. Jason had been sleeping with Kelsey behind Emily's back, behind everyone's backs, almost since the beginning of their relationship, and judging by the satisfied little smirk curling at the corners of his mouth. A smirk he didn't even seem aware he was wearing, he wasn't even sorry about it. Diane moved fast then, faster than I'd seen her move in years, standing up so quickly her chair toppled over behind her with a crash. She was all motherly concern and fake outrage, like some kind of bad actress in a soap opera who knew the cameras were rolling. "Now, let's not turn this into a circus," she said, putting herself physically between Jason and Emily like she thought she could shield him from the consequences with nothing but sheer force of will. "Emily, sweetheart, you're obviously upset, but let's not embarrass ourselves in front of family." That word, ourselves, hit me like a slap. As if Emily exposing Jason's cheating was the real sin here, not the fact that he had been lying to everyone for months, maybe years. As if appearances were more important than truth, more important than loyalty, more important than anything that actually mattered. Jason, emboldened by Diane's interference, stepped forward and tried again to wrap an arm around Emily's shoulders, but she jerked away like he had burned her. "Don't touch me," she said through gritted teeth, and the room, already tense enough to snap, seemed to draw even tighter around the edges. I could feel something ugly boiling up inside me, something sharp and sour that tasted like betrayal and rage and years of swallowing down every hurt just to keep the goddamn peace. I thought about all the times Diane had told me to be the bigger person, about all the times she had covered for Jason, when he stole, when he cheated, when he lied, and how every time, somehow, the blame always ended up on me for not being understanding enough, for not being forgiving enough, for not loving my brother enough to overlook the parts of him that were rotten. And then Emily dropped the bomb that blew the entire night to hell. She stood there, shaking but proud, tears shining in her eyes but refusing to fall, and she said, "And the worst part? Your whole family knew about it." For a second, I didn't understand. I sat there blinking like an idiot, thinking maybe I had misheard her, thinking maybe she was just angry and exaggerating, because there was no way, that could be true. But when I looked at Diane, and then at Jason, And then at my father sitting stone-faced at the end of the table, not saying a goddamn word. The truth slammed into me so hard I could barely breathe. They had known. They had known about the cheating, about the lying, about all of it, and they had decided, without me, always without me, that it was better to protect Jason than to tell the truth. My stomach lurched, not from the pregnancy this time, but from the sheer weight of the betrayal pressing down on me, suffocating me. I pushed my chair back with a screech that tore through the stunned silence like a gunshot and staggered to my feet, needing air, needing distance, needing anything but this toxic, poisonous farce of a family celebration. I caught a glimpse of Jason's face as I turned to leave, not guilty, not even ashamed, just annoyed, like I was the one ruining his perfect night. And Diane's voice followed me as I stumbled toward the exit, thin and sharp and desperate. "Hannah, don't make a scene." But it was too late for that. The scene was already made. The damage was already done. And for the first time in a long, long time, I wasn't going to be the one to clean it up. The night air hit me like a slap, thick and heavy with the sticky sweetness of late summer, but at least it was real, unlike the suffocating charade I had just fled. I stumbled across the lawn, past tables littered with half-eaten food and lipstick-stained wine glasses, my heart hammering so loudly in my chest that I could barely hear the distant murmur of voices still trapped under the glowing white tent. Somewhere behind me, I heard hurried footsteps crunching across the grass, and I already knew who it would be before I even turned around. Diane. Always Diane, chasing after me, not out of love or concern, but out of sheer desperation to patch up the cracks before anyone important noticed the whole damn thing was falling apart. "Hannah, wait," she called, her voice sharp and urgent, the kind of voice you use when a child is about to knock over a priceless vase, not when your daughter's heart is being ripped out of her chest. I didn't stop walking, not at first, but she grabbed my arm not hard, not rough, just firm enough to make it clear I wasn't going to be allowed to walk away without hearing whatever bullshit she was about to spew. I wrenched my arm free, breathing hard, the anger boiling up inside me so fast and hot it made me dizzy. "You can't just storm out," Diane said, her voice dropping to a hiss, darting glances over her shoulder like someone might be watching. "People will talk. You're making a scene." That word again, scene, like telling the truth, like reacting to betrayal, was the real crime here, not the betrayal itself. "Good," I spat, the word tearing out of me like broken glass. "Let them talk. Maybe for once they'll talk about the right damn people." Diane pressed her hands together like she was praying, or maybe just trying to keep herself from slapping me, and for a long moment she didn't say anything. Then, with a long sigh, like I was the one exhausting her, she said, "Look, Hannah, it's complicated. You don't understand how much Jason's been through. How much pressure he's under. Sometimes people make mistakes." I laughed then, a short, sharp bark of a laugh that tasted bitter on my tongue. "Mistakes?" I repeated, voice rising despite myself. "Mistakes are locking your keys in the car. Mistakes are forgetting someone's birthday. Jason fucking my best friend for months behind his fiancée's back is not a mistake, Mom. It's a goddamn choice." Her face tightened, her mouth pressing into that thin, disapproving line she always used to shut me up when I was a kid. And just like that, I realized she wasn't here to apologize. She wasn't here because she cared about me or Emily or anyone else Jason had hurt. She was here because she wanted me to keep my mouth shut. She was here to protect the image of the perfect family, no matter how many lies she had to pile on top of the rotting foundation to keep it standing. I crossed my arms over my chest, feeling the weight of the baby inside me, the tiny life that, until this very moment, I had been too scared to defend even to my own family. "How long have you known?" I asked, the question slicing the night air between us. Diane flinched like I had slapped her. "It's not that simple," she said, but the guilt was written all over her face, in the way she couldn't quite meet my eyes. "How long?" I demanded again, and this time my voice cracked, not from weakness, but from the sheer unbearable weight of knowing the answer already. She looked away, fiddling with the clasp on her necklace, and muttered, "A few months." The world tilted around me, and I staggered back a step, the betrayal hitting me harder than any physical blow could have. "A few months," I repeated, the words hollow and stupid in my mouth. "You knew for months, and you didn't say anything." "I was trying to protect everyone," Diane said quickly, her words rushing out like she could still fix this if she just spoke fast enough. "Jason's career, the family's reputation, Emily would have found out eventually, but not like this. You don't air dirty laundry in front of guests, Hannah. That's not how decent people handle things." "Decent people," I repeated, laughing again, but this time it was a dark, joyless sound. "Decent people don't protect liars and cheaters because they're afraid of what the neighbors will think." And that was when Jason sauntered out of the tent, looking for all the world like he had just stepped off a movie set instead of having his entire engagement blown to hell. His sleeves were rolled up, his tie loosened, and there was a smug little smirk playing at the corners of his mouth that made me want to throw something at his perfect, undeserving face. "Jesus, Hannah," he said, shaking his head like I was a stubborn dog, refusing to heel. "You're acting like you've never made a mistake in your life." I turned to face him fully, planting my feet firmly in the grass, and for the first time all night, I wasn't scared or sad or unsure. I was furious, and it felt good, it felt clean, it felt like burning off all the rot they had tried to bury me under for years. "You're right," I said, my voice low and calm, almost gentle. "I have made mistakes." I let the words hang there for a moment, watched Jason's eyes narrow as he waited for me to start listing them, maybe even expecting me to confess something, anything that would make him look less bad by comparison. But instead, I smiled, a slow, dangerous smile that made him take an involuntary step back, and I said, "But my next move? Oh, it's gonna be perfect." And judging by the flicker of fear that crossed his face for the first time in his life, Jason realized he wasn't going to be the one holding all the cards anymore. Not tonight. Not ever again. I woke up the next morning with a kind of electric calm buzzing under my skin, the kind that only comes when the anger has burned itself clean into something colder and more dangerous. The world outside my window was heavy with the kind of heat that makes the air shimmer against the pavement, but inside my little apartment, it was quiet, almost peaceful. As I brewed a pot of strong coffee I had no intention of drinking and sat down at my kitchen table, phone in hand, heart steady for the first time in what felt like years. I stared at the screen for a long moment, thinking about all the ways I could scream into the void, about all the sharp, vicious words I could hurl at Jason, at Diane, at every smug little face that had sat at that table pretending everything was just fine. But in the end, I realized words were pointless with people like them. They had spent their whole lives twisting words into whatever shapes they needed to feel righteous. No, if I was going to do this, it had to be cleaner, sharper, undeniable. So instead of posting a rant, instead of writing a sob story, I went into my old email, the one I barely used anymore, and found what I was looking for: screenshots of messages Jason had sent to Kelsey last year. Drunken little love notes full of spelling errors and disgusting promises that left no room for doubt. He had been sloppy, as usual, arrogant enough to think that nothing he did would ever come back to haunt him. I uploaded the screenshots one by one. No captions, no explanations, just the raw, ugly truth laid bare for anyone who cared to look. I tagged Jason. I tagged Diane. I tagged Emily. Hell, I tagged half the damn family, the ones who had smiled at me with pity in their eyes and whispered behind my back at family barbecues. Then I locked my phone, set it face down on the table, and poured myself a glass of orange juice, the kind with pulp, because for once I wanted something real, something that wasn't filtered and sanitized into blandness. I didn't check the reactions. I didn't sit there refreshing the page like some desperate teenager waiting for validation. I went about my day, showered, folded laundry, took a long walk through the park until the sun turned my skin sticky and warm, and by the time I got back home, I felt lighter, like I had finally put down a weight I didn't even realize I had been carrying. Of course, by then my phone was buzzing so much it practically danced off the table. Missed calls from Jason, from Diane, even from Kelsey, though what the hell she thought she could say that would make any of this better was beyond me. I didn't answer any of them. I didn't even listen to the voicemails, though I did catch a glimpse of the start of one from Diane. "Hannah, how could you do this to your brother? Think about the family." And I laughed out loud, a full, ugly, joyous laugh that startled my neighbor's cat through the window. By nightfall, it was official. The engagement was off. Emily packed up her things and left town, according to the flurry of gossip flying across Facebook and Instagram like vultures on a fresh carcass. Jason's friends, the ones who had always worshipped him like he was the second coming of James Dean, started unfollowing him in quiet little waves. Even some of the older family members, the ones who usually lived by the blood is thicker than water bullshit, couldn't deny the screenshots. Jason tried, of course. He posted a half-assed apology about regrettable actions and working through personal struggles, the kind of boilerplate nonsense that people slap up when they get caught and still want to pretend they're the victims. I didn't comment. I didn't even like or share. I just watched from a distance as the Golden Boy's castle crumbled into dust. Weeks passed. Summer slipped toward fall, the air cooling just enough to carry that first whiff of burning leaves and change. I stayed quiet, stayed small, stayed safe. When I finally posted about my pregnancy, it was a soft announcement, a simple picture of a tiny knitted hat resting on my growing belly, no fanfare, no desperate grasp for attention. Just the truth, simple and clean and beautiful in its own way. The people who mattered showed up. Friends I hadn't heard from in months reached out to say congratulations. Neighbors brought casseroles and knitted booties and awkward, wonderful hugs that made me want to cry for all the right reasons. Not a single member of my family showed up, not one message from Jason, not even a card from Diane, and for once it didn't hurt. It just felt inevitable, like shedding old skin that had gotten too tight to breathe in. One evening, sitting out on the back steps with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders and my hand resting on the gentle curve of my stomach, I watched the sun melt down into the horizon, all gold and blood and fire, and I realized something so simple it stunned me. Family isn't blood. Family is who shows up when the knives come out. I sat there in the gathering dark, breathing in the cool, clean air, feeling the baby kick lightly against my palm like a promise of something better, something new. I thought maybe I could be the kind of mother who never made her child feel like second best. Maybe, just maybe, I could break the cycle. As I stood up to go inside, I checked my phone one last time out of habit, and there it was, blinking on the screen, a message from Diane. It was short, cold, and so perfectly her that it almost made me laugh again. "We're still family. You owe us an apology." I stared at it for a long moment, thumb hovering over the delete button, feeling the weight of everything that had come before pressing down on me one last time. Then I smiled, a slow, real smile, and powered off my phone, leaving her words to rot in the dark where they belonged. Some debts, after all, are better left unpaid.